All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome. This is Wednesday, and we're happy to have two guests here from one back, I guess, from the New York Center for Infants and Toddlers, Cheryl Gilbert,
Good
and her
morning.
colleague, Eliana Reimer. Uh, they're going to be presenting this morning a presentation about teletherapy and titled Teletherapy Works. Give me 1 second so that I can connect our Spanish speakers to the interpretation that's being offered this morning. Buenos días a todos. Gracias por estar aquí en esta mañana. Si usted quiere utilizar interpretación simultánea, estamos brindando ese servicio el día de hoy y usted puede encontrar esa información, usted puede acceder a eso al fondo de su pantalla donde está un globito que dice interpretación. Simplemente oprime ahí y elige ya el idioma que usted quiere escuchar y ahí puede escuchar. El intérprete del día de hoy es el señor Rey Miranda y si no tienen, si llegan a tener alguna dificultad en escucharlo, por favor, nos avisen por medio de la charla, ¿ok? No se preocupe, queremos aliviar eso, entonces con confianza de avisarnos. Si llega a tener alguna pregunta durante esta presentación, por favor, coloque su pregunta en la charla o también en la caja cuya. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is JC Cortez, and I am the Director of Training and Development here at Synergia at the Metropolitan Parent Center. The Metropolitan Parent Center is one of three federally funded parent centers here in the city of New York, and the only one that's open right now during this pandemic. We've been around for 40 years and we serve people with disabilities and their families. We try to support them in every which way we can. At the Parent Center, that means education advocacy, family support groups, um, and yes, things of that nature. So we have a full presentation today, so I don't want to take any further time away from it. Ladies, we have Cheryl Gelber from the New York Center for Infants and Toddlers and her colleague Eliana Reimer, who is a special education therapist. Is that right?
Teacher. I think special education
Teacher.
teacher. Yeah.
There we go. Yes. And we're excited to have both of you. So without further ado, please, ladies, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, JC. Good morning, everybody. And thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name's Cheryl Gelber. I'm one of the directors at New York Center for Infants and Toddlers. I'm joined here today by one of our special education teachers, Eliana Reimer. We are thrilled to present this for you. One of the things that we are trying to be mindful of during such a tough time right now is that there are indeed some silver linings that can emerge in times of trouble. And one of those silver linings that we have learned or realized in this time is that there are some wonderful benefits to teletherapy. And so, in our reflection about all the ways that services have changed and how we've had to transition to this remote platform and helping young children and families, we have gathered some lessons learned from the early intervention services that we are providing. So I know there were some questions ahead of time about this presentation, who it's geared for and the age group and whatnot. Primarily for this presentation today, we're going to be focusing on early intervention. And so the nature of early intervention is really a one-to-one model working with children in their home and community programs or community settings with a very strong parent participation piece, so a strong parent coaching model. And so we had to take those services that were one-to-one in home and community settings and transition them over to a computer, to a screen. And so what we did during that time last March, where we were all kind of scrambling to figure this out, is figure out, well, what's the research that already exists out there about teletherapy, about this kind of remote intervention, and how can we include it and adapt it for the services that we are providing. And so we've been, almost a year. It's hard to believe that we are almost a year in of providing teletherapy services. And we have gathered some information that we think is really valuable to help families just understand teletherapy a little bit more, what it is and how we can work with young children. My colleague here, Eliana, or Ellie, as we call her, she's one of of our special ed teachers. She's really been at the forefront of figuring this stuff out and working with children and families through this remote platform, through this kind of teletherapy virtual platform. And so we worked together, and really this is Ellie, so I want to give her all of the credit here, to compile some lessons learned, what we found works and doesn't work about teletherapy for early intervention services. It indeed works. Teletherapy works. We think there are some really valuable, wonderful lessons that have come out of this and some great outcomes. And so I will stop rambling and hand it over to Ellie so that she can talk to you all about what we have learned in our early intervention services in providing teletherapy for infants and toddlers through an early intervention program. Take it away, Ellie.
All right. Thank you, Cheryl. I'm Ellie. I'm an ABA provider and teacher from New York Center for Infants and Toddlers. And as Cheryl said, I'm here with Cheryl to talk about teletherapy and why it's been so important and actually beneficial, especially recently. So let's get started. All right, so take a look at these quotes and see if it brings up anything for you. Any of this sound familiar? Maybe you've thought or said a few of these statements before. I definitely had a few similar thoughts when we switched over to teletherapy back in March, like, how is this even going to work? After some time, I realized that I had to shift my expectations a bit. I was no longer providing services directly to the child, but now to the parents and caregivers too. I was adapting to a new way of delivering services, and I was realizing that parents and caregivers had a lot to adapt to as well. So not only am I changing the way that I'm doing my job, many parents are changing the way that they're parenting. Many parents are working jobs, taking care of multiple children, taking care of their own parents, cooking, cleaning, and now they have to put on a new hat as their child's therapist on top of all that. So although difficult, many families have found that receiving their child services via teletherapy has helped them learn to engage their child in a whole new way. So teletherapy, what is it anyway? The American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association defines telepractice as the application of telecommunications technology to deliver professional services at a distance by linking clinician to client or clinician to clinician for assessment, intervention, and/or consultation. So what this basically means is that clinicians and educators are able to deliver services, whether it's occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, ABA, assessments, evaluations, through a technological video platform, just like we're doing now. Telepractice typically occurs in real time and face-to-face with the clinician via online video conferencing. Whether it's Zoom, FaceTime, Google Meets, it must have a video component so you can see the child and the family. So teletherapy has been around long before COVID-19, which was news to me. In 2005, telepractice was approved by the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association as an appropriate method of service delivery. Telepractice may be used to overcome barriers of access to services caused by distance, unavailability of specialists, and impaired mobility. In 2006, telehealth helped to close the healthcare and special education disparity gap in rural areas due to shortages of teachers, clinicians, and money. They found that telehealth helped to reach medically underserved rural populations due to distance barriers as well. And after years of utilizing teletherapy as a model to provide services, it was found that parent coaching was one beneficial model that came out of it, which we're going to go into. Parents reported increased knowledge and confidence in developing their child's communication skills. And teletherapy was demonstrated to be an effective, reliable, and exciting addition to a new era of therapy provision. So we discussed the past of teletherapy, and now we want to discuss the future. So I wanted to bring this slide back up. We talked a lot about the thoughts and feelings that came up when we mentioned teletherapy, a lot of unknowns and misconceptions about what we think teletherapy may or may not look like. Well, we are here to clear some of that up for you today and to tell you that there's no one way to deliver teletherapy services. One size does not fit all. We, as educators and providers, many of us parents and caregivers ourselves, understand the challenges that come with swiftly changing the way in which we operate our day-to-day functioning, especially when everything was working just fine before all of these changes. When you hear teletherapy, it can be tough to envision. Many of us think my 2-year-old is going to sit in front of a screen for 45 minutes, maybe even 2 hours if they get ABA, and they're going to listen to a stranger and be engaged. There's no way. And we're here to tell you, you're right. There is usually no way. One size does not fit all for teletherapy. All children and families are different. So it would be impossible to use the same model of teletherapy for all children. Just like it would be impossible to use the same exact learning methods and techniques for all children in person. It's always important that we meet the child where they are in terms of their skills and abilities. For example, if a child who's on the autism spectrum has trouble making eye contact, they will not be expected to make eye contact with an instructor through a screen. Next, we must build a rapport with the family and the child. This is really important. Just like in an in-person session, we need to be comfortable with each other and trust that we're both going to be following through and making these sessions a top priority. The child and the family have to become comfortable and trust the clinician before starting the process. We will want to know also what the family's top priorities are. What do you want to see for your child? What are your main concerns? And then we can assess the child's skills and come up with an appropriate and attainable goals together. So what does this look like? There are many ways we can assess skills. Observation is a big one. This is a major way that we as clinicians assess a child's present level of functioning without using any intervention. So this would remain similar if you had a child in a home-based session. Clinicians might sit back and observe how the child is functioning in his or her natural environment at the home, and how he or she engages with familiar people, how they're communicating, how they're interacting with materials and toys, etc. So you might be thinking, how is this going to work over a screen? And many clinicians vary in the way that they do things. What I like to do personally is I turn off my microphone and video. I have the parent put the computer or the phone up high somewhere, and I have the child play just as they would if I'm not there. This may feel a bit awkward or uncomfortable at first, but after a few minutes, you might even forget that they're observing. Observation is an extremely helpful tool for clinicians to gauge where to start and what to work on with your child. Another way we assess skills is to interview the parent or the caregiver. After all, who knows the child better than the parent or guardian? Questions can be as detailed as, how does your child sleep at night, to what does your child eat? At what age did your child start talking? What are your child's favorite toys? So this will give the clinician a full picture of who your child is and types of things to target. Ways to teletherapy. After an assessment is done and goals are in place, there are various ways clinicians can accommodate your child's needs. 2 ways that we're going to focus on are parent coaching methodology, which you can see here on the left. And secondly, we have direct interaction through the screen with the child and the clinician. So we're going to go into further detail. Okay, here we have the parent caregiver coaching staircase. So since we can no longer work directly with your child in person, parent coaching has been a huge component in providing teletherapy services. Embedded coaching has always been a huge part of early intervention services, but now more than ever, we're relying on this tool to help children bridge the gap from school to home and keep services and techniques consistent. Many parents have been so pleased with this aspect of teletherapy. They've been happy to receive the support in the home that they normally wouldn't get or get to see when their child is in school. So there are many different aspects of parent coaching, and not all clinicians will run their sessions the same. So we've created a staircase model to show you different ways that parents and caregivers might be coached through teletherapy. So we're going to start with a basic model and then move our way up. The most basic model is clinician and parent goes over the plan for the session. So this may not involve the child directly at all. This is where the parent and clinician are having a basic, simple conversation. They might be discussing topics of concern, goals, areas to work on, strategies, problem behaviors, etc. Then we're going to move up to something just slightly more involved than the first, which is the clinician observes the parent and child interacting and playing. This is very similar to what we just talked about in the assessment phase, which is the clinician is like a fly on the wall while the parent is engaging with the child. The third step up, again, just a little bit more involved, is the clinician discusses that last observation with the parent. So they can discuss some things that they notice the child is doing. They can discuss some things they notice the parent was doing or saying, give some feedback to the parent, etc. The next step up is the clinician discusses that last observation with the parent. So they can discuss some things that they notice the child. So the clinician models, demonstrates the technique to the parent. So sometimes we have to get a little creative when we're modeling and demonstrating, since we're not there in person. For example, I've used a baby doll to demonstrate different levels of prompting in my sessions. I've said, put your hand here, to come up with different ways of modeling to use different techniques without being there in person.
I'm going to pause here for a second, Ellie, and just kind of reflect a little bit on this. Mm-hmm. I think that the main point here that we're making with this model and is the staircase is that we don't just jump in to working with a student. It's not like we turn on the computer and say, okay, give us your 2-year-old, put them on the screen and we're ready to go. It doesn't work like that. And it doesn't work in general. And so what Ellie's describing here, and it's sometimes hard to conceptualize, but I think she's doing a good job explaining that there's a process, there's an unraveling that happens. And so the very first part being, we need to talk to families. We need to understand what are their goals, what are their needs. Of course, we look at the IFSP, we talk about that. It's really kind of a parent interview, caregiver interview. Sometimes we want to get to know the siblings that are home. We want to get to know the grandparents a little bit. We really need to understand who's home with the child, what are their goals, what are their needs, and plan for how this service is going to be most effective for this child and family. To Ellie's point before, there's no one size fits all. It's really in kind of tailoring it to the child, not kind of, we are tailoring it to the child. And so this is an important piece, this in observation, this assessment, just getting to know you phase. And then in addition to that, and kind of where Ellie's going is, we want to see your child. We want to see how the child plays. We want to see how they communicate their wants and needs. We want to see how they interact with the environment, interact with toys, interact with family members. We want to see. And so that's oftentimes best sitting kind of back and just seeing them in their most authentic self. And that actually is a part of the early intervention model, which is the authentic assessment piece of the embedded coaching model. So being able to really just take a seat back, be a fly on the wall, and observe the child and how they are interacting with people, the space, toys, materials, whatnot. And then to Ellie's point, taking that a step further and discussing the observation, and then going back and kind of planning needs, ideas, scaffolding the session. What will the session structure look like? Where should we start? How will we start? And really designing something that's going to be tailored to the family. And that could include, like what Ellie's saying now, modeling, demonstrating technique. So to elaborate on some of Ellie's examples, we often, and this has been challenging because some of us don't have all our materials and toys at home, but I can tell you that I've propped my computer up in my kitchen. I've gotten some spoons and plates. I can't tell you how many eggs I have cracked and not used because we're doing cooking projects. We just kind of make up what we can with the materials that we have and model for the family. This is how you can take your everyday home materials and activities and turn them into teachable moments, therapeutic moments. And so that's kind of what Ellie is describing, is like grabbing the things that you have at home and showing the family what we would do with the child when they're also at home with the child, how we would turn these kind of everyday things into teachable moments, therapeutic activities. And so it's a lot of modeling, a lot of really coaching the family, training the family. When you are pretending to mix the spoon and the bowl, they may not do it. So put your hands right on their hands and mix along with them just for a couple of seconds, and then give a lot of praise and excitement so that hopefully they'll want to do it again with you. So it's really about us coaching and kind of modeling what would happen if we were there. So I'll hand it back over to you, Ellie.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for clarifying that, Cheryl. Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's hard to explain. We had to model what we're trying to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I was saying, sometimes I will use a baby doll and show the parent on the baby doll where to prompt the child. So if like I'm teaching a child how to point to what they want, I will show them how to prompt the child using a baby doll's hands to point. So then the clinician will model and demonstrate the technique to the parent. And then the next step would be the parent tries the activity or technique and the feedback is exchanged. And then the last and the most involved step is the clinician is basically training the parent to do what they would do in a session if they were there in person. So it's almost like I'm your earpiece and I'm telling you each step to take, and the child barely even knows that I'm there. I've also heard some clinicians having parents send videos of interactions between them and their child, and the clinician have gone over strategies during these sessions with the parent, which is another way of parent coaching. So there's many, many ways that parent coaching can work with you and your provider in and out of the session. So we have an example of parent coaching that I'm going to show you now. This is a speech session. I'm just going to start it.
Yeah, she's doing that. That's good. And so we're also kind of working on increasing her vocalization during play. So I thought we might start with that with some of the animals and barn stuff that you have. So let's just see if we can get her using some exclamatory sounds and words during play, working on her imitating, and let's see how she does with that.
Ooh, alrighty, I have her little farm here. She's already got the animals out. She's ready to play.
Here we go.
Oh, hi. Say hi. Tell the chicken hi. Say hi, chicken. Hi. Is it the horse? Say neigh, neigh. Where did he go?
So what you might do is get the barn closer to you, so you're a little bit more face to face with her. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Sit right here. Or here, let's turn this way. You stay right there and Mom,
There we go.
There we go. Yeah. Look, can you put him in? In. Where'd he go? Knock, knock.
Yeah, and you can do like lots of yay, lots of clapping.
Hi. Oh, is that a horse? Nay. Tell him bye-bye. 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 Close the door. Good
Good job. Good job. Yay.
Knock, knock. Good job.
Okay, so you can see here that the speech therapist is not trying to communicate with the child directly through the screen, even though at some points the child is communicating with her, which is great. She's communicating with the mom and then giving her some suggestions and feedback while she plays with the child. So first she went over the goal for the activity and then some tips, and then she let mom take the lead. This coaching method is helpful for a lot of parents because it's giving them an extra set of eyes and different ideas and strategies to engage their child. You might not think, oh, I should sit on the floor, or I should position myself this way, or I should say this. But having that clinician there to give you feedback is actually very helpful, especially in your child's natural environment, because now you can take all of these skills and strategies that you picked up on in the session and practice them throughout the day. Okay, so here we have another example, and this is one of our physical therapists, Ribbon from New York Center. This is just a quick example of parent coaching as well.
Hi, Addie.
Fast forward.
Our knees ready?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And last one. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yay! Now the other leg.
Other leggy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
3,
2, 3, 4, 5.
4.
2, 3, 4, 5. Last one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Good job.
Okay, let's do our hips. Cue lie down.
Yes, go to the hips.
Cue lie down.
Lie down, Addie, like Serafina.
Good
Aw.
job.
Yay!
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
1,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
2,
2, 3, 4, 5.
3,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
4.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yay, you did it! Good job.
Very fast.
Okay, so another example of parent coaching, and this is the example I was trying to explain earlier, is she's using a baby doll to show mom how to prompt and how to you do the exercises on her daughter here. So she's coaching mom how to work with her daughter.
Hi, Addie.
Sorry about that.
Um,
Okay, so there are some children that will be able to attend to the screen. By no means does this mean we want you to place them on the couch in front of the phone and go run errands. We still need your help. We can't do this alone. Even though a child is paying attention to the screen and looking at me through the phone, there's a good chance if I give him or her a direction, they probably will not follow it. That's where you come in. That's where the parent or caregiver comes in. They're there to help prompt, guide, teach, and follow through when we can't be there. For instance, if we're reading the same book together and I ask your child to turn the page, I need you to make sure that he or she follows through. So here are some examples of direct teaching. We have reading books, using visuals. So there's some visual games on the computer or the phone that we can play together. There's modeling play with toys, just like we discussed earlier. And just like Cheryl was talking about, stirring with a spoon, playing pretend play, and then playing videos and songs. And I just wanted to note here, because I know a lot of parents worry about screen time. When we play videos, we make sure it's interactive as possible. So we don't just turn on a video and leave. Sometimes in my sessions, if songs or videos are motivating to the child, I will pause the video and I'll use it as an opportunity to have the child request for more music. You can also use videos to have the child imitate gestures in the songs or imitate vocals or vocalizations. There's lots of ways to use songs and videos that are interactive and fun. So the child's not just glued to the screen with no real purpose. And also the parent and the caregiver, they have to be there to help guide the child and help the child be interactive. Cheryl, you want to add something to that too?
Yeah, I want to jump in. So thanks, Ellie, for making that point. There's a lot of concern now about how much screen time kids have, families have, adults have. We all have a lot of screen time right now. And there's also some good research about what that has as an impact on children. And what we know so far is that it's really a difference between more active screen time versus passive screen time. And so what I mean by that is, if you are engaging with your child with the screen, so you're pointing things out, you're singing along, you're having a social interaction with the child while also using the screen as a tool for that interaction, that can be very helpful. That can be great teachable moments that can really support their learning and their development. Now, if you're putting a child in front of a screen without any engagement by another person and more passive, they're just kind of staring and watching, that's where we run into, some concerns about how that impacts development. And really what it's about is that it's limiting the time that children spend with other people. Because what we do know about the young brain and early childhood development is that meaningful interactions with loving, supportive, trusting caregivers has positive effects on brain architecture. When you engage with babies and toddlers and young children, they have positive outcomes that happen because their brain grows. Their brain is a sponge and it soaks that up and it helps them to develop in lots of different ways. And so really it's about making sure we're sustaining engagement with children with loving and caring caregivers. It could be parents, it could be grandparents, it could be siblings, it could be anybody, but it's really about having engagement while using the screen as a tool so that we're continuing those meaningful interactions and helping to support their brain development. And so, do we want kids spending a lot, especially under 2, spending time with screen? Not really. However, what we do know in early intervention is that we can use this, what Ellie was saying, parent coaching piece as a way to help support those interactions with young children and families. But then as we're learning here and getting more into direct teaching, as children are getting really older than 2, so direct teaching really works with kids older than 2, I would say, and that's not a hard cutoff, but around that age, in that they start to engage with us in the screen. And that's more the engagement with the person. And so again, we're not using this as a, here, watch this video, great, we've covered some ABCs. No way. We're using a video or a tool to support the engagement with us, the person. And that's really the difference. And that's how we troubleshoot this kind of excessive screen time during this pandemic virtual world that we're in. Okay. Back to you, Ellie.
So I will give you an example of direct teaching through the screen.
Avisha, in speech language for top.
Start here.
That's right. And
It's a duck. Okay, the thing. Quack, quack, quack. Okay, thing. Quack, 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 quack. Should we open? Okay. Gobble, gobble, gobble. Ba, 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 ba. Gobble, gobble, gobble. Ba, 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 ba. What should we do?
Next video, watch Samantha work with Honey on targeting spatial concepts with teletherapy.
Do you know where my ape is? On your ear. It's on my face? Is it on? Oh, on my ear. I see. Oh.
Billy, get him.
Honey. What about, where's my bee? I can't find my bee. Bee, oh bee, where are you? Your Mommy, what's that? Chin. Yeah. That's on my chin. Oh no.
Loved how Samantha was able to get his attention just like she would in person. Watch them work together on articulation.
Good. Spin. What number is it? 3. That's right. 1, 2, 3. It gets some gas.
Get some gas.
Yeah, it's getting some gas. Look, he's at the top.
And say the word
Top.
good.
Good job. Good putting your lips together at the end.
Okay. So you could see the difference between this clip and the last is clearly that the clinician is communicating with these children through the screen. And the children are able to attend to the screen for at least a short period of time and process questions that the clinician is asking of them. And which is different than the skill level, maybe than the girl in the previous video. And here's just a very quick example from one of our ABA therapists, Jessica, New York Center.
Always twisted as you. Alex, enséñame tu nariz. Muy bien, mira. ¿Qué es esto? ¿Qué es esto? ¡Plato! ¿Cuántos años tienes? Yo. 2. Muy bien. ¿A dónde vives? Nueva York. Nueva York. Bien. ¿A dónde vives? Nueva York.
So, as we mentioned before, Jessica was using video as a motivator for this child to ask questions and have him answer questions. So he was listening to Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, and then she paused it and she was asking him questions and then prompting him to answer them.
want to jump in here, Alex. I love these videos so much. I watch them in my spare time because they're so cute when people send me. And I think, you know, one of the things we've celebrated during this time is we have, for those who've approved for us to do so, shared these videos with each other, say, look at what we've done. Look at what this little boy was able to do. Oh my goodness, he's talking now. And there's like a sense of pride that we all have that we're able to get these incredible outcomes. We're able to get 2-year-olds to be able to do this kind of thing. And so what I want to say, this is one of my moments where I say teletherapy works. Look at what we're doing. We're making great outcomes happen. We're getting kids engaged. But along those lines, you know, it works because we've got teachers invested in figuring out the right ways to get engagement and tailoring, like Ellie said, to the level of the learner, and really working with the family, and also having a very engaged family member, you know, having those family members engaged and committed. There's a mutual commitment to helping this child be able to benefit from this kind of intervention. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention about, you know, seeing these kids, these little guys, is it is very different than what you would see for, say, elementary school children or even some preschool children. We don't do the Zoom classrooms, and we don't have the large groups with lots of kids and kind of passively giving some sort of lesson. While there's much value to that for that age group, that doesn't work for these kids. And so with early intervention, it's one-to-one, like what you're seeing, very one-to-one, very tailored and specific to the child, to the family. We really work with you to figure out what's the right way, what is the right duration, what is the right style of session. And I know Ellie's going to get into kind of the behind the scenes of the teacher or the therapist, you know, what it looks like in the screen for families, but then what it's like for us as a clinician. But you see, it's very independent. And so with that, it works for OTs, as you saw with Ribbon and PTs. It works for speech therapists, as you saw, you know, with the barn video. It works for special education teachers like Ellie doing ABA or even non-ABA. You can see there's a little discrete trial instruction. It's just one component of ABA that we use, but we were able to do it with the student and with this teacher. And so it is possible. Teletherapy can work. It just is about tailoring and finding the right match and really working up that staircase, that progression to get children and families further along in this learning process. Ellie, your turn.
You got it. Visuals. So as you could see in the previous examples, the therapists and clinicians were using visuals to keep their students' attention. Visuals are something that if you ever worked in early intervention or special education, you are no stranger to. On this slide, you can see some choice boards, virtual games, a first then board, a token board that have all been used via teletherapy and have actually been a great bonus for me, at least, working via teletherapy. So I just wanted to provide some examples and show you. So here's some choice charts over here, Mr. Potato Head game, a first then, etc. I'll get into that a little bit more. Okay, so now that you've seen some examples of teletherapy models in action, we're going to show you some plans and schedules that clinicians might come up with. So here we have a schedule of a potential 30-minute speech session. Looks pretty simple, right? Some of you might be thinking, what do I even need a therapist for this? I can do this on my own with my child. And the great thing about this session is that it was tailored to the child's interests. So the provider who created this lesson already knew this child well and knew that she enjoyed these specific activities. So the lesson was created and to embed teaching skills into activities that the child already likes. Now, what kind of skills are those, you might be thinking? So here's the exact same lesson. Looks a little different, right? So what looks like a simple lesson definitely has some intent behind it. You definitely don't have to read all of this, but I wanted to give you the idea that, you know, some just some goals that the therapist was working on. Having the child imitate 2-word phrases, spontaneously saying 2-word phrases, answering WH questions over here, the materials. And then, showing you over here that this lesson uses more of a parent coaching model. You can see in each section that the therapist writes notes to the parents, giving them suggestions about what to do with the child each activity. This speech session does not rely on a child interacting with the instructor through the screen. And it's something that this provider had discussed with the parent when they came up with a plan. Again, here's another 30-minute speech session. Same idea, different goals, different materials, some of the same activities with different tips and tricks. Here is an example of an ABA session. This is 1 hour. And this is actually an ABA visual schedule that I use with one of my kids. He happened to respond very well to visuals. So each time we finished an activity, I was able to put a check mark on the picture to signal that it was all done. And this was 1 hour. So, we had to break it down a little bit differently than a 30-minute speech session. So we added some movement breaks, some table breaks, some, actual breaks. And then for each activity, I zoomed in and focused on specific goals. For example, on this slide, I just give the parent some reminders of what we're working on and what to have available. So again, we're here to show you that there's many different examples of what teletherapy can look like depending on the child's family and family's needs. So it is important to note that plans can and will go out the window, and that is okay. Kids can be very unpredictable. Sometimes they have off days. Sometimes we have off days. I've had many teletherapy sessions where I've had to adapt my plans to the vibe of the child or family that day. The child needed more movement that day. We played some movement videos, had him do some gross motor activities. They needed to be more regulated. We got some sensory activities. We got some flour out of the cabinet. We got some rice and beans and, some cups and did a sensory activity. If the parent's struggling and having, overwhelmed, we decided to change our plan for the day and just had a conversation and come up with ideas about how we're going to handle a child's problem behaviors for that day. So we can be flexible. And it's important to know that not every day is going to be a seamless plan. Cheryl, do you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't said it better myself. I think that not every day is perfect, especially during this time of this pandemic, and we're home and trying to figure life out and what our new normal is. Although it's been a year, I think we're all still trying to figure out our lives and what we're doing and where we're going. But to Ellie's point, not every session is perfect. And so we really ask that families be flexible, that it's not going to be seamless. We're not going to have these perfect, beginning to end sessions. There are going to be moments where the child gets upset about something, or they need their diaper changed mid-session, or something falls or breaks, or, this is life and that's okay. But I do think that the wonderful moment about that is that when it is off, so to speak, how can you make that a learning moment for your child? What can you do to keep supporting your child? How can you keep those teachable moments happening 24/7? Well, maybe not 24/7 because kids nap and sleep, and we do too. But how can you keep all these moments as meaningful moments and learning moments, both for you as a parent and also for kids. And so those off days are also meaningful days. Just because it's not a perfect activity or perfect lesson doesn't mean that it doesn't have benefit for both the child and the family. So I think that that's a really good point to be thinking of here.
Yes, I definitely agree. And also, I wanted to add that if your child is mandated for more hours that you can juggle or you think is appropriate, it can be discussed and altered, the amount of hours for their services or the timing. We can be flexible, we can work around your schedule, can adjust timing to make it work, because teletherapy and services are supposed to benefit you and your child. They're not supposed to overwhelm and make it harder for you. So that's another thing to keep in mind as well.
Absolutely. And I think that, I get this question a lot from families. How many hours of therapy should my child have? How many hours of ABA should my child have? How many hours of speech, or how many sessions of speech? And what is the right match? And what I say to families back is all of them are the best amount of hours, meaning all moments of the day are important. Now, how much time with therapy or with a teacher? Well, let's look at your schedule. Let's look at what's reasonable for you. If you're given a mandate that feels like it's too much and you're juggling your whole life around this and it's stressing you out and it just is overwhelming and you're not feeling it's helping you, if you feel like it's having more of a negative impact on your life, then that's too much. That's too much. And so you can work with, in the early intervention program, at least communicate with your team, communicate with your service providers, communicate with your service coordinator, and tell them this is too much. We want to cut the session. I only want to do a half-hour session, or I can only do 1 hour session every other day, or let providers know what is digestible for you. What can you reasonably include into your home life so that it has benefit for you? And then once you find that comfortable spot where you're doing just enough where it feels like it's helpful and manageable in your routine, and you're questioning, maybe I could do a little bit more. And if your child is approved and it's clinically appropriate to do a little bit more, then you can talk with your service coordinator, the EIOD, about would more be warranted and how much more, where would we fit that in? Again, it's individualized. In EI, it's an individualized family service plan. So we really want to step away from, everybody gets 20 hours of ABA, and really think about what does this child and family need, or it is appropriate in order for there to be meaningful benefit. That's really kind of the question here. And so being strategic about that and thinking about your life and your routines and how things can fit in has a big part of the decision making about what to do with teletherapy. So I encourage you to communicate about what's working and not working. If something's too much, if it feels like you need a little bit more, that these really can be tailored.
Yes, definitely.
And definitely that overarching theme, Cheryl, that we had last week about using your voice and speaking about your concerns. Always good to speak up. Better that way than the alternative. We do have a couple of questions before we continue. I know we're almost towards the end, but how do you incorporate competing a child's program is the question.
How do you incorporate competing a child's program? I guess I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Ms. Haverson, if you can rephrase the question, let us know.
I'd love to answer it.
Yeah. And one of
I guess I need more specificity.
Sure. And then one of our professionals said, we both eat the cookie together in one of those situations you were just talking about. Let's see.
Yeah, it's a great thing to. I've had many snacks on teletherapy, maybe more than I should. Maybe the pandemic has given us more snacks than we should. But
all of us.
I definitely, we use, again, everyday routines and activities and incorporating them and doing that with children. Like, the cookie's so good. Or look at what's your cookie. And here's my cookies. You get some pronouns in there. And there's some real great teachable moments in just simply eating a cookie. And so our colleague here had commented, there's great interaction, there's great joint attention. Oh, look, she has a cookie. Look, here's my cookie. You have a cookie, right? Kind of that triangle of interaction, that joint attention, pointing out each other's status, each other's events. So I concur, this something as simple as eating a cookie can be a teletherapy, therapeutic moment, teachable moment, if you will.
Sure. No, absolutely. Let me see. There were a couple of questions that we received before the presentation or for registration, and one of them was, which therapies are adversely affected or excluded because of the pandemic? Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, they all are in some way, and mostly because nothing really matches in-person interaction, right? So, when we're in person and we can be hands-on and we can grab materials quickly and we can pause and we can, there's nothing that matches being in person. I mean, with early intervention, but even just as a society and as humans, that social interaction is so important. So, everything is impacted, but nothing really matches that in-person support. So they're all impacted in some way. When I think about, I've been an ABA provider, Ellie is also an ABA provider, and there are certainly some techniques that we would use in ABA that we as seasoned clinicians and kind of just do it in the moment hands-on are doing more fluently with children. We have to pause and coach families on how to do these techniques, use these strategies. So there is that layer of where we would provide more that direct instruction with children and we kind of using these techniques more fluently. We have to first train the family or whoever's present with the child on that. So there's that kind of extra layer of training and then coaching them and then giving them the feedback in real time. And so that can kind of delay how some of these techniques are used, prompting, timing with prompting, timing with reinforcement. For some of you that are familiar with ABA, it can really kind of impact that. And so that is something that certainly has been impacted. There's just technique with things and technique with strategies and therapy. But generally speaking, just because we're not in person, they're all adversely affected. But the big but here is we are still providing services and we can still get to children and families. And it's so much better to do, even if it's 1/2 hour a week for your child that needs it. It's so much better to do that than to do nothing at all. It just kind of, delays it even more. And so just doing something is better than nothing. And eventually we'll get back. But, having at least this as a tool, we didn't have this many years ago, and we have this wonderful technology. So we should use it to at least make things happen as best as they can now.
Ms. Habersham followed up with that question. Yes. How do you coach families on doing isolated trials?
Great question. So I think I'm getting the sense of where this question was coming from. And I think it has to do with ABA and, how do you work on a child's individualized program and maybe discrete trial instruction, which I was starting to talk about a little bit. If we are going to use discrete trial instruction in our session, and there's a big if there, because it's there's a lot of technique involved in discrete trial instruction. And we spend, at least at New York Center for Infants and Toddlers, we spend lots of time training our providers on the proper technique. It's not just watch this video and go do it. It's really nuanced and there's technique with it. And it's also used in a very particular context. Not all children get discrete trial instruction. And just because they're not getting DTI, as we say, doesn't mean they're not getting ABA. ABA has lots of other strategies that we use. And so what we've done is kind of really shifted into more of the natural environment teaching components of ABA. Some are more verbal behavior, some know that term, components of ABA, and really using everyday routines as these teachable moments and integrating the theories and principles and teaching strategies of ABA into those moments. And then when we see that there is a child that does need more of that direct instruction, needs instruction broken down, needs more repetition, we will communicate with the family on them being trained through this kind of a platform on how to do that. And so we will work with the family first to train them as part of this session. And we'll start slowly here. Let's try this first and explain it. And then they try it with their child, just like we would train any new provider. And then we really want kind of the family to do the discrete trial instruction to the best of their ability. If we do have a learner who's able to engage a little bit more directly, as you saw in some of the videos, we can do more of that directly with the child and the provider. But that's not common with kids under 3. They're little, they can barely sit for 5 minutes. So to be able to do that with us, it's really hard. So it really harnesses on using the family and training the family. And that is indeed a silver lining. We have equipped the family with a wonderful tool for helping their child to learn, where in some instances, when we're in a home, we kind of roll up our sleeves like, oh, we got this, we'll do it. And we put on the show, and then we kind of prevent the family from learning the tool when we do it ourselves. So this is a really powerful moment, is being able to, we're forced to really train and teach families how to do this. And it's empowering. It's empowering. So you able to help your child in a way maybe you weren't able to before. And so that's what we try to focus on, is the positive aspect of it.
Well, there's another question. How do you handle a tantrum while in session?
Well, it depends, right? So just like any other moment, whether it's in session, out of session, in person, out of person, we think, and then we work the parent through, okay, what's happening right now? We start about what's the function of this behavior. And really we're talking about coaching the parent. Let's coach the parent. How are we going to respond right now? How are we going to bring that child's regulation to a manageable level, to a place where they are comfortable and they're available for some redirection? And so we really coach the parent. And this happens. I would tell you, I had a student for the first 3 months of teletherapy. Every session was about managing tantrums, but it was powerful because I was coaching the parent how to do this. So then when I'm not there, they have the tools and how to manage tantrums outside of the session, which is really the point of the intervention services, is to equip families with these tools, right? And so we coach the parents on how to bring the child to a more regulated place. And then we talk through all of the different techniques of managing these challenging behaviors. You know, what's the function? How can we be proactive, set this child up and set the family up for a successful home activity or transitions or routines, what to do again if the tantrum happens again. A lot of times with young children, a tantrum happens because of a lack of communication. I give a presentation on behavior management, and I say all behavior is communication. So if you look at it through that lens, that children at this age tantrum because they're trying to tell us something. So if we can try to figure that out, what are children trying to tell us? Then we can come up with a plan on how to address it. And so that's what an early intervention provider will do, is talk through that with the family. Just because they tantrum doesn't mean that the session goes to waste. I actually like to see some, I hate to say it, see some tantrums. So if I can help the family in this moment and they have the tools when they walk away from the session. I don't want kids to tantrum. That's not what I'm saying. But if I can see it and coach through the moment, it's much more helpful for families when they leave the session than when I see, perfect behavior in our session. So that's something to think about.
All right. Well, we have, let me see, just a couple more questions, actually, really quick. I know we want to respect your time and make sure you get to the next place on time.
Yeah.
Is somebody in New York State taking data about the teletherapy and the results, negative and positive, of its users?
Yeah. It's a great question. We actually got something recently from New York City Early Intervention that was surveying providers and families. So I imagine that is a form of data collection. What they're doing, I don't know yet, but I know there are surveys that are circling around. If there is a family here, a professional who has access to a service coordinator in early intervention, you can also reach out to me. I think my email's on the screen. I can help share that survey, and it really they're looking for parent feedback and provider feedback. What they're going to do, I'm not sure, but there is data collection actively happening right now with some surveys.
Okay, that's excellent. And then lastly, is there the possibility of agencies closing locations to continue services remotely?
I don't think so. I think if an agency is closing, it's not because they're closing to continue teletherapy. I think as many have been affected, there's some financial challenges that are going on right now. And what that means for each agency and their ability to sustain their programs is certainly a question. But I do not think that agencies are closing to continue the teletherapy model. I think we all know that in-person services and those meaningful interactions between caregivers and adults and young children is really the best form of intervention. I do not think that teletherapy is going to replace that. I think that if anything, teletherapy might be here to stay in some capacity. In what that might be, I'm not really sure. But I do not think that teletherapy is going to replace the in-person services that have already been set up previous to COVID-19.
Yeah, I hope not.
Yeah,
All right.
me too.
All right. Well, thank you so much, ladies. We don't have any more questions, so thank you for
Great.
your time. Eliana, thank you for coming and joining us today. Welcome. Come back anytime you'd like. Just a quick thing, reminder for everybody that's joining us today. Tomorrow we will have another webinar. It'll be with our friends at Ramapo for Children, a great organization here in New York for over 100 years, on creating structure and routines while at home. That'll be tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And yes, you should receive a flyer. If you haven't already, you'll receive it tomorrow, I'm sure. But yes, and if you have any questions, please contact our intake line for additional support for all of our services at Synergia, whether that's the Metropolitan Parent Center, our Housing Advocacy Division, or our Family Support Services. Please just let us know. Oh, and we have day have and employment. So if you have any questions for that, please let us know. And thank you so much. I will be sharing again this presentation in both English and Spanish. Thank you guys, ladies.
Awesome.
And we will also share a link to the video. So, all right. Please be sure to fill out the questionnaire survey, and we really appreciate your attendance. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.